Hi, everyone. Gene here. Welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, where every single week we answer the most common and uncommon questions about tapping and EFT so you can get the most out of your tapping practice, eliminate self-sabotage, and take the action that you want. Today's episode is a really special one. I have 3 stories told from their point of view from people who use tapping regularly and how it specifically changed and transformed their life. And this is the perfect type of episode that if you have a loved one in your life who's thinking about tapping, or maybe they're on the fence, to hear more stories, to see how it is useful. I also want to send a special shout out to all of the supporters who have been supporting the Tapping Q&A podcast. Because of the new ones that have come on over the last couple of months, it gives us the opportunity to do something special like this. This particular episode took a lot longer to produce. Between doing the interviews, the editing, you'll hear all of that as we go through the show. And that's possible because of that support. And we'll talk about that later in the show. If you'd like to be a supporter, I can talk about how you do that. So here are 3 first-person stories to help you get more out of your tapping. This is Gene Montrastelli. Welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg, Brooklyn. This is episode 361, originally aired May 1st, 2019. Everyone, I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I really love today's episode because it's just people talking about how tapping has transformed their lives. And there's so many lessons that we can learn by simply hearing people talk about their own experience. So I want this to be encouraging for you. I want this to be affirming for you, but also listen to the lessons as they talk about what they've learned and how it's impacted the way they make choices now and choices that they would like to make differently. 2 of the interviews, one by Esty and one by Jackie, are both EFT practitioners and actually work with folks. If you'd like more information about both of them, I've included their contact information on the website. If you'd like to reach out to either of them, go to tappingpodcast.com, click on the episode 361, and you can find both of their information. The third person that you hear from today has chosen to keep herself anonymous, but I still appreciate the fact that she was willing to share her story. If you would like to share a story like this sometime in the future, please let me know. Send me a note, Gene, Gene, at tappingqa.com. Or if you're on the website, click on the contact link. If you're inside of our free Tapping Q&A app, all you need to do is click on the contact button. You can send me an email from right inside of the app. It will probably be a few months before we share something like this again, but I would love to hear more stories from people like you. So here are 3 stories of people using tapping in a powerful way.
Hi, I'm Esty Alinas Turnauer. I live in Netanya, Israel. I grew up in the States, but I've lived in Israel for about 30 years. I'm married. We have 4 sons, and I am a clinical EFT practitioner. We learned about EFT initially, my husband and I, through Gary Craig's work many, many years ago, probably 23, 24 years ago, when our oldest sons were very, very young. And we had the DVDs, and we had started learning EFT from the DVDs and used them with our children when they were little to help them go to sleep, to help them with little boo-boos or little upsets and things like that. And I put the DVDs away in a drawer after a while, and we just never got back to it. Over the years, I've been deal with a compulsive behavior, namely what's known as trichotillomania, hair pulling. And something that I had started when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and it had become really compulsive. Like, it started out as a habit and something I would stop as soon as I noticed the damage I had done, where I'd left little spaces, missing eyelashes, missing eyebrows and whatnot. And over the years, I had looked for a way to get rid of this behavior. It had become more and more compulsive over the years. I was very frustrated. I had a lot of shame around it. There's a lot of shame around hair pulling with other people who have hair pulling as well. And for 20 years, I never talked to anybody about it. I didn't know it was a thing. I really just thought I was the only person who ever did this. I started talking about it I remember exactly, it was 2007, 2008, as a result of a workshop I had done. And I just started sharing it with people. And that was very freeing, actually. It was what I discovered was people didn't like me any less because I did this thing. That was the big fear, was the rejection. Or the people would go, "Ooh, that's horrible. How can you do that to yourself?" And I really only got that reaction from one friend, but it was more like, "Oh, doesn't it hurt to do that?" But it wasn't really discussed. And the other thing I discovered in this process was everybody has something, and people would start to share with me their own, saying, "Oh yeah, I do that," or "My mother does that too," or "I bite the skin around my nails," or something like that. And I was just like, wow, I guess this is just part of being human. Well, welcome to the human race, Esty, And it was very hard for me because I had grown up very much a perfectionist. And in communicating with other people with hair pulling, I find that this is a recurring theme as well. I don't know why exactly, but so I had tried a number of things over the years, hypnosis, which had given me some relief. I had tried theta healing, which had gotten some relief. Nothing gave me lasting relief. And, at the most, I might go 2 or 3 months without pulling, and then it would come back with a vengeance. And so I just decided to just be with it, just leave it alone for a couple of years. I said, I do it, I don't do it. It's just something I do. It doesn't mean anything about me. And I really just completely accepted myself with it. And 3 years ago, at the age of 51, I said, it's time to once and for frickin' all put an end to this. And I instinctively felt that it would be a transformative process, because there must be something fueling this hair pulling. There must be some stressors, some things that I have not yet uncovered and I've not yet dealt with that I could uncover and deal with. And that will be transformative. And I'll get rid of the hair pulling. And I had known about EFT, and I had tried, and I remember listening to something that Gary Craig said about using EFT for compulsive behaviors. And he said, oh, you'd have to do the tapping routine 12 times a day. And I said, oh, so I've got to become compulsive about doing EFT to get rid of the compulsive hair pulling. So I thought, well, that's not very realistic. I mean, I might do it a couple of times a day, but to be doing it 12 times a day, I don't think so. But I very much believed in EFT and energy therapies. I do have a background as well as a reflexologist and an iridologist. So I just went online and I looked for somebody who does EFT and had experience with treating people with trichotillomania. And that was Wendy Marone, who I think you know. You've interviewed her in the past, right? And so as it turned out, I was leading up to my trip. Every summer I visit the States. And so I made an appointment to see her shortly after I arrived in the States. As it turned out, her office is a short drive from my parents' house. And I started working with her. And at that point, I was pulling compulsively. I mean, just anytime I sat down to watch TV, read, or work at the computer, I was just there. Even when there was nothing left, there was not a single eyebrow or eyelash left. And to people who are listening to this and don't know what this is, it sounds horrible. I know it sounds horrible. And this is why most people with this don't talk about it. I went to see her, and she gave me the personal peace procedure to do, AM, PM tapping to do. And I started with it right away. And from the next day after meeting with her, I stopped pulling. And I can say I did 8 sessions with her over 6 months. And I would say I was at least 95% pull free. And even if I did pull, it would be I would catch myself and say, oh, I don't do that anymore. I don't need to do that. It was so not a part of me anymore. And as I discovered, the healing process is not a nice, smooth straight line. So I did have a relapse 9 months into it. And I was very hard on myself. It was very difficult because by this point I decided I'm going to get certified to do this. I want to help other people with this. I know I'm in a unique position to help other people because I get it. I've been through it. I do it. So I felt that I could really create a safe space for other people who suffer with the hair pulling, and people suffer. I gave up the suffering a long time ago. You know, Tony Robbins says, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. I didn't know how I was going to help other people since I had had a relapse. And I got some coaching on that and realized it's just part of the process. And that made me stronger and also gives me the strength and the power to help other people and to prepare them for what's to come, you know, in the journey, and to be forgiving. And that's a really important piece, I think, of any healing process, is for us to be really forgiving of ourselves. The one thing I wish I had known much, much sooner was that hair pulling is a thing, that it wasn't just me. That would have made such a difference for me early on. I would have felt so much less alone, less isolated, less like a freak. I think it would have had so much less shame. I was introduced to tapping sort of in a roundabout way. A number of years ago, a friend of mine came to me and she said, out of the blue, one day, she came to me and she said, "Hey, I think I'm supposed to teach you EFT." And I knew enough to know that you knocked on your face. And I was kind of like, "I'm good, thanks. No, I'm good." And then over the next year, I found myself in a really dark place. I had been doing some work for a nonprofit that was, it worked with families, and the positions that I had been running, I had been in leadership positions, and they had been really hard. We had had some people who had literally died. We had had the biggest wildfire in Colorado history disrupted an event, and we had to move 200 miles in 4 days. We had people quitting, and there was a lot of stuff going on. And I was running this event in that intervening year, and I went to the event that I was running, and I sat in a meditation session. And the person who was leading the meditation session asked us to sit with our pain. And the word that bubbled up for me was inadequate. At first, of course, I was devastated because it always hurts when somebody tells you that, even if it's you. But the other thing was that I got mad because I could see that the work that I had done over that year with all of those problems that I had managed and led the team and the organization hadn't fallen apart. I was like, what will it take for me to be not inadequate? Which sort of led me, boy, did I fall down a rabbit hole really fast. I ended up doing inner child work and codependency work and dysfunctional family work. And the more I learned, the more I could see what was happening, but I couldn't change it. I couldn't feel any better. To the point where I was in bad shape. I was actually getting suicidal. And one day I went back to the same friend and I said, "Hey, I think you're supposed to teach me EFT," because I couldn't think of anything else to do. And she was good. She met me the very next day. We went to the park. The kids went off and played. We sat at a picnic table. She taught me what to do. And then I went home and did nothing for 3 days because I had no idea what to do with it. And she had said, if you can't come up with anything else, go and try a YouTube video. So I called up a YouTube video at random, but we all know that we're led to where we need to be. And I started sobbing during the setup phrase. And I cried for the entire thing. It was 5 minutes long. I still remember what it was. It was 5 minutes long. Cried and cried and cried and cried to the point where I couldn't hear it.
as soon as it was over, and now I would do it differently. Now I would stop, but at the time I didn't know. When it was over, I sobbed as hard as I've ever cried in my life for probably 20 minutes. And then, because I didn't know any better, I'm like, that probably would have worked better if I had heard it. So I hit play again, and I tapped through it a second time, cried the whole time, and then as near as I can tell, I passed out. When I woke up / came to 14 hours later, I was still in my clothes on top of my covers. I don't think I had rolled over. And I was like, that seemed to be pretty powerful. I should try that again, because again, I didn't know any better. I hit play, and it was boring. And the charge was gone. And I was like, wow, I may be onto something. And I have pretty much tapped every day since. If I were to talk about where tapping has been most significant in my life, I would say there are two things. And they're related. The first one is that it helped me deal with that stuff that came up in that really dark year, and the stuff that I was able to see, but not do anything with. I don't hate myself anymore. And that is life-changing. It is life-changing. And along with it went with the not hating myself. I've also gotten I've healed from codependency, so I have boundaries, which is crazy. And I can hear the difference between the critical voice and the hateful voice. And one of them is the wrong execution of the right idea, but it means well. And the other one doesn't. And I can tell the difference. So all of those I healed. And that was incredibly powerful for me. The other way that tapping has been significant for me is that it probably took me 4 years to figure out, but it was my daily mindfulness practice. Because you know as well as I do, when you're working on something in the moment, you need to be able to tune into how you feel. And you need to be able to say, what am I telling myself that's making me feel this way? What happened in the world around me that's contributing to this? Where is it showing up in my body? Learning that, how to drop in and be present with myself was something I had never learned. And I've actually gotten to that point where I have that beat between something happening and me responding, which they say is possible. And I'm a crappy meditator. Oh my God, I'm so bad. So it's nice to have a tool that actually works for me. And it has made a real difference for me. Being able to respond instead of only react has, I think, changed me a lot. I wish I had known from the beginning that it works, because I waited that year and I suffered a lot in that year because I was convinced it wouldn't make a difference. And I wish I had been able to tell myself, hey, you know what? It actually does work, and it's worth it even if it looks silly or if it doesn't seem like it ought to work. Just go ahead and try it, because it really will make your life better.
Short interruption before we hear the third story. At the top of the show, I had mentioned the fact that the reason we were able to do this particular episode is because of people who have supported the Tapping Q&A podcast financially, because it creates the time and space for me to be able to invest to do something like this. This is more comprehensive. I'd like to send a special shout out to Allison and Christy. They were the two most recent people to financially support the podcast. If you would like to support the podcast, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/support. Not only will you get an opportunity to make sure that we keep producing amazing content like this, we have a number of awesome bonuses, including bonus podcasts. For those of you who are supporters, the bonus podcast is going to go live tomorrow. That is on Thursday, where you're going to get an opportunity to hear the second tool that I taught a couple of weeks ago that is in conjunction with podcast 360. Every single month, we take a portion of those donations and we loan them out on Kiva to support small business owners all over the world. So those of you who are supporting the podcast this month are also supporting Celia. Celia is a rug maker in Bolivia, and she hand weaves the rugs from wool. And the loan that she is receiving from Kiva, which you help to support, is helping her to buy wool in bulk so she can create those rugs, sell them, and support her family. Also, we want to thank all of the people from around the world who are listening to the podcast since the beginning of the year. This week, we'd like to thank everybody listening in Iceland, Qatar, Argentina, Barbados, Colombia, and Hong Kong. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Again, if you'd like to support the podcast, go to tappingqa.com/support. And now here is our third story.
My name's Jackie Simic, and you can find me at jackiesimic.com. All right, so I was first introduced to tapping about 5 years ago. I had just come home from backpacking by myself 10 months around the world, and everything I thought was great was going to like fall back into place. And then 5 months later, I was newly single, still looking for a job, and living in my childhood bedroom, kind of facing some truths about my life and patterns that I was reflecting on. Like I had always had this pattern that came up where I would not feel good, look for something outside of myself, find that and have a temporary fix. And then that would only last for like, a certain amount of time until I didn't feel good again. And I'd look for the next best thing. At this point in my life, the gig was up because I literally had traveled the entire world. And I was like, okay, it's obviously not out there. I need to do the work inside. And I made a pretty like bold declaration that I wasn't going to continue forward in my life feeling this way and having this pattern on repeat. And I think like when we make these types of like bold declarations, the universe kind of comes in and says, all right, I'm going to help you. So it was no surprise that very shortly after that, I was sitting in a therapist's office, and 40 minutes into our session, she said, do you want to try this thing called tapping? And I literally said, I don't care what you call it, just make me feel better. We tapped on a story that I had about the relationship I have with my father and the effect that it's had on my life, and why I think, I had low self-worth and I wasn't deserving and that things wouldn't work out for me. And, I didn't think anything of it beyond like, this was silly. And I repeated what she said and was touching my face and my body. And a couple days later, something didn't work out, or I perceived it wasn't working out for me at the time. And I went to reach for the story, and I like kept reaching and I kept reaching, and I like couldn't find the story. And it's not like it didn't happen to me. Like I, knew what my childhood was, but the emotional connection to it was gone. The like victim mode, the feeling sorry for myself, it just didn't feel true anymore. It was like, no, it doesn't have to be this way because of what happened to me before. So I felt very like empowered, and I was like, what is this stuff that clearly works? As I started to delve deeper into tapping, and I was literally like going to work all day long and then seeing volunteer clients at night, because I really wanted to show up as a certified practitioner in the world. And so to do that, you have to complete the required coursework and working with people. And so in essence, I was burning the candle at both ends and also getting triggered all over the place, because I wasn't ready to be in that space, to hold space for clients, because I hadn't done enough of my own work. And so, breakdown later, I found somebody to help me unpack things a little bit and really get like deeper into my childhood and get deeper into how I saw myself and how that was like affecting my self-confidence and my self-worth. And I see the change a lot in terms of dating and relationships. Before, I used to show up to a date. I got really self-conscious about whether I was good enough for this person, whether I was going to be a match for this person. I literally would get myself drunk so that the person would become more attractive to me. And it's funny because now I don't even drink anymore, but that's another story. And so making really poor choices in my dating life and feeling like there was so much pressure on each date. Like that was the salvation. Like this person, as soon as like I could get into a relationship with this person, like all my problems would be solved. And now I've just so relaxed when it comes to dating. I mean, I'm not even on dating apps anymore because I just feel like I'm in the flow. I meet people naturally out. I want to take my time to get to know them. I want to take my time to like share who I am. I want to have fun. I want to show up and do sober daytime things and it doesn't have to be this cookie cutter label the way that we've all been like, oh, we're supposed to go to dinner with somebody or we're supposed to go to drinks first. Like there's no rules now. Like I set all my own rules and I just go intuitively through like dating and trust the whole process, and nothing that happens or doesn't happen is a reflection on who I am as a person. Yeah. So I think before I was definitely picking the quote unquote wrong men that weren't available. And that was stemming a lot from childhood of trying to get my father's attention. And so that felt like a normal way of being for me, right? So I always wanted my father's attention. So the same thing, I wanted like a partner's attention. And so I would pick partners that like weren't available emotionally or physically they lived somewhere else or whatever the case is. And I would like almost get obsessive with that. And with tapping through, we did a lot with this professional I worked with. We did a lot of inner child work, kind of relaying down foundations, going back to stories where, main stories that had happened in my childhood that laid down this foundation of wanting someone's attention, and then using tapping to heal that. And then also using tapping to lay down like a new relationship with my inner child. And then we all have like an inner mother and an inner father that sort of lives within us, and like re-strengthening that relationship. So literally like such an empowering and freeing thing to do, because for many of us, family members and whatnot, maybe they did the best that they could, but it wasn't what we needed as a child. And we're not going to go and like get that person to change and try to relive our childhood or try to send them to therapy at this point in our life. And all of a sudden we're going to feel better, because we're not. And, even some of those people maybe we're not even in contact with them anymore. Maybe they've passed on, but all of the work we're empowered to do ourselves. Like we can change the effects of like the things that have happened to us in the past.
So I want to really, really thank the three people who took their time to have a conversation with me and to share their story with all of us. It is encouraging when we can hear the progress other people have been making. And again, this is a perfect episode for you to share with your loved ones who might be on the fence about tapping, because they can hear first person about things where tapping has made a difference. Don't spam your inbox and send it to everybody in the world. But if you know someone in your life who is on the fence, this would be the perfect stories to share with them that might make the difference to get them to give this a try. Again, all year, our goal is to get 9 new people tapping every single day as a community. If we do that before the calendar year is over 3,000 people will be tapping along with us. And if 3,000 people transform their lives, like the stories we heard today, not only are their lives better, but our lives are better as well, because they are showing up in a healthy way into the world. So please, please, please pass the show along. It would make a huge difference, and I would really appreciate it. If you'd like to be interviewed and talk about your experience, reach out, Gene, Gene, at tappingqna.com. Click that contact link on the website. Know that you can get every single episode that we've ever produced absolutely free in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. The shows are going to start showing up in Pandora in the next week or so. If you go to tappingpodcast.com, you can find all of the information, how to follow the show, get all of the past episodes for free, and get all the shows going forward. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Montrestelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Montrestelli Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Montrestelli or Tapping Q&A.